Welcome to Helsinki Open Waves. You are listening to Ferment Radio, a podcast series on bacterial and social fermentation. Fermentation can incite social action, spark creativity, and bring surprising new tastes to our lives. My name is Aga Pokrywka, and I invite you to join us in a conversation on living interconnectivities. From macro to micro, from societal to cellular, and from global to personal. Did you already eat today? What stories could you tell us by looking at your plate? Where did you get your food? Who cultivated it and where? Were they paid fairly for their job? Was this food processed before it was packed? Who earned money on it? Did you eat alone or in the company of people you care for? Will consuming it impact your mental and physical state? These stories are a big part of what this episode's guest does. He is a rebel chef on a mission to decolonize diets and promote food literacy. Through his work, he wants to change how people eat and therefore how they relate to each other. In his stories, he also talks about fermentation as a metaphor of something small, invisible, and powerful, an accelerator for change. Who is our guest today on Ferment Radio?
My full name is Njathi Kabui, and Njathi being my given name, my last name being my father's name, as my culture goes. And I was born in Kenya, and to a farming family. My mother was a coffee farmer, along with all the subsistence food that we needed to eat. I was born in the slopes of Mount Kenya, and I spent 10 years of my life in the country in the village with my mother. And then I moved to the city for 10 years, where I lived with my father for the most of the time, because I was schooling there and my dad owned a restaurant there. And both of my parents were activists. They had been involved in the struggle for liberation, and that's why my father worked in the city. And my mother worked in the village, and my father came in home at the weekends. And that is very, very central to who I am, because the first 10 years of my life I spent with my mother. I learned about growing food. We had animals, we had fruits. We grew majority of the food that we ate. Then when I moved to the city, then I became exposed to the activism of my father. My father was active in the community, in community development, in that kind of stuff. In local politics, very active. So that exposed me to activism on that sense. So then I came to the U.S. Where I studied political science and philosophy, and then I went on to study medical anthropology and urban anthropology. I was the first one in my family to earn a college degree, although I was the last born in the family of 7. And so, it was a big thing for me to come to the U.S. to study. And the ideas of activism, interest in social justice, interest in food, which I realized very early that food was part of food was the most political thing, actually. I didn't know it then, but I had a sense that it was political, as hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about in the podcast. But so then when I graduated, I started working around issues of food. I later on went to culinary school, and now I work around issues of justice and food. And and I work here in the U.S. And also have a project in Kenya. So I worked internationally around food issues. So that's a good summary of who I am.
Well, building on this, what you just were talking about to us, food and politics, how would you describe the connection between those two?
One, the question about food and politics is very similar to a question, probably one of the very similar question I heard somebody ask. What's the difference between politics and war? What's the difference between politics and war? Okay, and somebody say that war is politics with guns, and politics is war without guns. And that's very, very similar. So politics and food is the very, very same things. Napoleon once said that his army walks on the stomach. If the army is walking on the stomach, that just points to the centrality of the ability to feed oneself, or how political food can be. Because obviously, if the army can walk because it has no food, then there will be no war. So, and I also know that behind every war, there's a market, and behind every market, there is a potential war. Either somebody want to gain access to it, or somebody you have to protect it. So, in that sense, food is very, very political.
Mm-hmm. And since you mentioned Napoleon, it also made me think of the word chef itself you were using in your name. Also has, in a way, kind of political dimension because it has kind of a origin from French cuisine, I guess.
Yes.
And it also makes me think that in cooking itself and in culinary world, there's so many things which, come from certain cultures which are dominant or colonizing other cultures. And I would like you to ask, how would you replace that word chef? Or maybe we can use those words, and it's okay.
Oh, that's a very good question, because one of the first things that happens in the process of colonizing indigenous people or any group of people, not just indigenous people, we can see same case applies probably in the very earliest times. Whether you go back to the Greeks, you go back to the Romans, if you go back to the British when they conquered Ireland, when the British later came to conquer Africa, and the Spaniards and other conquering people, the very first thing they do is name the places they go. So, Columbus came to the U.S. and he went to what the current day Haiti, which was called Hispaniola, and half of the island was named after his brother, Dominican Republic, for example. So all these places you go are named St. Mary, St. Elizabeth, New England. People who conquer other people, the first thing they do is name other people. So the name that people apply people should realize that also names have very, very direct political implications. That a name is just a name. You can call me any name. So being conscious of that, I've thought a lot about the name that I use of chef. And I can use a name chef here in the U.S. because I'm a member, for example, of a profession. So if you're a doctor, then you're a doctor. If you're in the West or if you're in Finland, then you use a word that is used there because people will call you a doctor. Because that's the language you're using. But what about when I go back to Kenya? It's not necessary that I use my name as a chef as a title. So I thought a lot about that as an anthropologist, and I came up with a word that I thought that would be the most appropriate word to use, and not only a chef, but also the work that a word that will most closely identify the work that the kind of chef that I am, and also which is the kind of chef that I think people who have been previously colonized should use. So in my case, I looked at the idea of a chef and its roots in France and Italy as a person who is the most proficient and the most qualified and the most well-trained person in terms of food. And that was then, that was way back before the French Revolution took place. And then the chefs started cooking for other people, because before that, the French Revolution, the chefs were only cooking for the loyal people. So it's also a term that has very, very, is very deeply rooted in the exploitation of the common people. So the word is tied to injustice, because those people had in my view, illegitimate power. Those kings were not ruling people for the benefit of, as a way of protecting the rights of the regular people, but for the protecting the power of the powerful. So anyway, so I came up with a word that was that represents the most valuable thing among my community, which is the Kikuyu. I'm a Kikuyu. That's the ethnic group I come from. And in my ethnic group, there was no gold, there was no silver, we didn't have any precious metal. The most important thing that we had was a cedar tree that had been fermented over the years in the forest, and all the rot pieces that could rot out of the cedar tree rotted out. So the frame that was left was called muguda. Muguda was very, very precious, and it will be used as a bridge because it will never rot. Even if you just put in water for however many years, it will never rot. And so I thought that was a very, very appropriate name to use as the most valuable person who is most highly trained. But I added the word stomach because that person need to be to make our stomachs the most precious they can ever be in any period of history, but also precious enough to be able to protect itself and project the community members into the future in a healthy state. So I call that term mogudada. Mogudada meaning that the most precious thing that's fermented. Wood that's very fermented is very precious, and it was used either for making walking sticks or using to build a bridge across a stream. And I use that term very intentionally because my work is geared towards helping people of the world, but specifically people who are oppressed, to cross the bridge from the side of oppression to the side of sustainability and freedom.
It's a beautiful thought. But since you started to talk about, you mentioned the tree which through fermentation or decomposing kind of refine itself and becomes this iconic material. I wanted to ask you about the role of fermentation in your cuisine, which you are promoting, but also in general in food justice. Is there a place for fermentation, and if yes, what it would be exactly?
Very good question. Yes, fermentation is a process that uses enzymes, natural enzymes. So it's a very natural process. It's not an artificial process. It's not a GMO process, but a very, very natural process that has been part of the human food culture for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I don't know if anybody has looked into it, but it's very hard to think about a time where human beings, after they started eating, where they didn't eat fermented food. So fermentation has been part of the human cuisine for a very, very long time. Even if it wasn't, I do know that fermentation was a very, very big part of my own ethnic cuisine because people would ferment porridge, people would ferment beer and to make honey wine. People would ferment meat by putting in honey. Very, very probably the most precious piece of meat that a man could share or a person could share with a friend, with a guest, was called rokodi, which was meat, a very specific type of meat that had been fermented in honey, and all the water sucked out of it, and it can last for years, right? So fermentation is very, very important. In my thinking, fermentation is also important in other ways. The use of enzymes are of great interest to me because the more I studied, I learned that of all the other things in the world, the enzymes has the highest speed of acceleration. Enzymes can accelerate at a higher speed than anything else. Nothing can accelerate at the speed that enzymes can accelerate at. And to give context, the Big Bang, when we have the highest recorded acceleration of energy, where we move from just a little bit energy to a lot of stuff, the big explosion. According to some scientists, they say that the rate of acceleration was 10 to the 16th power. But enzymes, in comparison, can accelerate 10 times that. So they can accelerate at 10 to the 17th power. So if you think about that, there's a lot of importance. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from enzymes and the power of things that are so small, things that are invisible to the eye, some of them. But yet they hold so much power. And as a person who is very interested in anthropology and culture, I'm very interested in myths, But this is not a myth. This is just a use of symbolism, right? So I'm interested in creating stories that people can, or telling stories in my food, which is that's how I talk. Most of my talk is, if you listen to it, I never ever talk without using symbolism, using myths, and using short stories or long stories and whatever. But I understand the importance of stories. So to understand or to draw that picture to the audience or to the guests that eat seems to be very effective. So if we understand that a fermentation can be a sort of substance that we can use for myth or can symbolize the natural process or the power inherent in the natural being, in nature, especially when it's unadulterated, in unadulterated nature. There's a lot of power in it, and also there's also power in things that are functioning in the natural form, in the natural way. And there's also a lot of power in things that we don't see. There's a lot of power in things that we think are so small, right? So, if that can help us focus on the small things first, the basic foundations, I think we can do better things and we can move towards a better and a more just food system, a food system that's based on what? On justice, where justice is a foundation. As fermentation is a very natural system that is very just. We are using enzymes. The enzymes are doing something they like. They are not being forced to do. They benefit. So it's something that's mutually beneficial process, and then human beings benefit out of it. So so fermentation is a very, very big part of my understanding, a very big part of my writing. You might have anybody who might read about some of my blogs know that I've written about one of my most popular essays I've written is about the Republic of Mauritania, which is the process of making honey wine in my culture, and the lessons that we can learn from the process.
Would you like to, in very short? Of course, I encourage everybody who is listening to us right now to read your essay on your webpage. But could you just tell us in short about it?
Yes, so I can. Thank you. The story of Mauritania, it's called the Republic of Mauritania, has very, very similar sentiments to the story I told. So one, I'm taking honey wine, which is made with sugarcane. And sugarcane, sugarcane has segments. There are segments, and it starts with the most basic. At the very root is where it's most sweetest. The sugarcane is very sweetest at the very top, and the youngest part of the sugarcane are less sweet. And the very top of the sugarcane actually carries the seed. So if you want to propagate sugarcane, you can cut every piece, but most people eat the sweet part and they leave the sweet part that's not sweet, and they just stick it in the ground, and just like that, voila, you have another sugarcane. And then the sugarcane will just keep producing other sugarcanes on the side. Then you have honey. Honey is very, very important and very, very symbolic in my culture because it's one of the food that people eat. People drink honey wine communally too. It's not very usual for somebody in my culture to have just sat by themselves and drank honey wine after they ate, which like something that you might find similar in some Western cultures where people in the family, they eat food and they drink a glass of wine before they go to bed. Honey wine was something that was consumed communally and most importantly, for celebrations. In fact, every time that somebody would brew and the women would do the brewing of the honey wine, it was usually one as a way of thanking a friend or appreciating a friend, or during a ceremony, like there's a wedding, there's something important, somebody was born, there's a newborn child, then you brew this honey wine. So when you use honey in the honey wine, you're using a commodity that itself is a community commodity, because the bees went all around the community to get the pollen from the plants in the community, and then they brought the honey back. So that's really is not actually your honey. The bees, obviously belongs to the bees, but that's the one food that really is very, very representative of the community food, because if other people are growing things with chemicals, then you contact those, by extension will pollute the honey in the community. But if everybody's growing organic food and nobody's using chemicals in the community, in the 5-mile radius, we know, then we know the honey is clean. So when people come together and they consume this honey, they are consuming their own part of their own product, because they have contributed significantly, either in keeping it pristine or in polluting it if it's polluted. So that those are some of the symbolism that we have, but not those are the ingredients that we have, the symbolism of the ingredients. But to make the honey wine, they would use a plant, the fruit of a plant called African sausage tree. And African sausage tree is a tree in my community that had the most seeds. That plant has more seeds than any other plant, actually, especially big seeds. We're talking about seeds for their size. Nothing has that many seeds, and it looks like a loafer. So you can imagine a loafer has all these seeds all along and inside of it. And the Muratina, the fruit of the African sausage tree, is not harvested. You wait for it to really mature and then fall on the ground. So again, it has a lot. The idea and the lessons of maturity and patience. You have to be very patient in it. And so I saw very interesting symbolisms and very interesting lessons. And whenever there was a marriage, for sure, and as well as I mentioned other ceremonies, the honey wine was very important.
It also makes me think that stories are so useful or potent to address things which, like large systems, like a food system, it's something which exceeds probably our singular person perception. But if we start to tell stories about it, we can start to understand a little bit better what is it all about. And I just wonder if, for example, the mead wine has the story as you just told. I wonder what is the story and the food would say we buy in fast food or in a supermarket. What is the story of that?
I just recently came back from Kenya, and I toured quite a bit. I visited farms, I visited some of my family members, and some of these places I saw a granary. I saw a very old granary too, and I think should be a picture of that on my website as well, chefkabui.com, or my Instagram. But this granary took me back to the times of my childhood, because my grandmother had one, my uncles had one, my aunts had, every homestead traditionally had a granary, and the granary was the equivalent of a food pantry. And so as I started now thinking about it, I thought about, wow, think of what are the differences between a pantry and a granary. The granary was the only building that was built off the ground. So it was elevated by post, so that pests couldn't get in there, rodents couldn't get in and that kind of stuff. So then in one of those granaries, I saw a pot, a clay pot, which was what the kind of utensils, that was a default cooking utensils. We didn't have steel pots. We didn't have, cast iron and all that kind of stuff for cooking. We use iron for other things, for making knives and stuff, but not for cookware. So, so anyway, so I looked at this pot and I asked myself, what would this pot say? This pot, if this pot had ears and it could speak, it would tell all the stories of the things that were discussed around the fireplace, by my grandmother, and all her children, all her daughters grew up in the same kitchen. All her co-wives, would come and visit, and all the guests who would come and hear. Who come and we serve from that big pot, that kind of stuff. So that's not something new. Also, so we are thinking along the very, very, very similar lines. So anyway, so now that you asked me about fast food would talk about probably a lot of the pain of the workers, the people who are doing a job they don't want. So it would be a very sad story, because a lot of the food that we eat now, I think there was a study that I looked at, I think 2 years ago, that follows our eating habits in America. And more people are eating by themselves, and more people are eating their meals in the car more than any other time. Like 40% of the meals that time were consumed in the car. People are just eating them. People report, I was eating in my car when I was going to work, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that has an impact on the kind of post, if there's something quote unquote, I say post corona, or the period, I call the period in which we are AC, after corona, or the corona period, CP. Now there's one of the biggest news that are trending politically is, for example, is that the governor of Texas, no, not the governor, but the senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, said that tweeted that people should go to work. People who are unemployed should go to work, because there are 10 million jobs in the US, but 8.4 million unemployed workers who are collecting unemployment. So that means that there is more than enough jobs for everyone who is looking for a job. But so there was a very big debate on all social medias, on Twitter and as well as others, where people giving back their opinion. And so I'm giving mine here and say, maybe one of the reasons why a lot of those people don't want to go to that to job is because they didn't like those jobs. And if they really like those jobs, they will go to those jobs. They will need either the governor or the state, the senator from Texas to tell them that. No, but they won't need anybody to tell them that. Nobody had told them to go to work to look for the jobs previously, before the corona epidemic. But the reasons why people don't like these jobs is, in my view, partly because those jobs meant that you would eat in your car, you would eat by yourself. So most of the food that was served there was not food that was happy. It was not food that was fulfilling. It was not food that was served with the intentions of promoting health. They were not food that would promote happiness, wellness. There was not jobs. Those are not jobs where people are gainfully employed. Those people didn't feel as though they were part of the cooking process. A lot of the people were not there because they wanted to be there. But now, if you juxtapose that to the story of my grandmother's pot, that pot, just about everybody who ate from those pot, food cooked from that pot, there are people who really wanted to be there. Right? Yeah, the people who really wanted to be there. That a lot of the food was cooked with a lot of happiness and a lot of joy, and I call that legitimate power. The power that was inherent in the preparation of food was legitimate. Even if there was authority, there are people who are more powerful than other people, but it was legitimate power. And it was also sustainable. There was a lot of sustainability built in from the pot. That pot was built by those people who were cooking that part, or people from that community. And the food that was being cooked in that part was food that was grown in that community, right? But now some of the food from the fast food restaurants, they are coming from very, very far. Animals who are raised with a lot of corn-based. A lot of the meat in the U.S. is raised using corn, which is 96% GMO. They are raised in feedlots, which is concentrated feeding operations where the animals themselves are not eating free or are not being free range or grass fed as they should. So there's a lot of they are raised using antibiotics, for example, and the people who raise the animals did not really like their jobs. We know in the U.S. also that a lot of the people who pick fruits and salads are people who are immigrant workers who don't have rights, so they are not protected by the law. They are not paid overtime, for example. So there's a lot of illegitimacy in the whole process of all the things that go back happen before the food get to the restaurant where the food is cooked. So in the place where the food is cooked is no different from the place where the food was grown. Or some of the truck drivers who are carrying food, driving food to the restaurant. So so that's a very, very big good question. And there's nothing that really demonstrates how broken our system is than that single question that you asked.
Yeah. Probably something which is even more broken than the system, or its result of broken system are broken relationships. Because when you were telling the story of, I don't know, a food which is festive, or the way how food been in all of cultures, basically, like most of the cultures prepared was something highly collective, while now it's becoming more and more popular to be totally disconnected from how food is being prepared or grown. And even we eat it separately in a car, which is actually so sad. Even on a personal level, of course, not even thinking about like a global damage it is causing. I have to also thank you because when I was preparing for this conversation with you, I've been going through some of your appearances online and your writings. And one of the things, or like a wow moment, and I remember about it now because you mentioned about GMO, that I always thought like, oh, GMO is bad because it's genetically modified and therefore we shouldn't eat it because we don't know if it's healthy to us or not. But I realize that just some corporate guys, they just copyrighted nature. It never got to me. So thank you so much for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah. Hey, that's what it is. When you say there's nothing that's not sad about our whole food system, and to say the food system is broken is also a misnomer. It's not broken. The food system is working perfectly for the people who designed it, and I think that's why I thought it was brilliant that you started with the political question. Now we realize that food is a form of war, and also is a form of demonstrating who is in power. If you really want to understand the power imbalance in the world, just look at the food system. You see people. There's no other creature in the world that consumes things either period or consumes them at the rate at which we consume. And three, consumes things so mindlessly when the thing that they are consuming is the intended result of the things they're consuming is early death, painful death, and sickness, guaranteed. Like that's there's no if or buts about it. It's like you drinking alcohol. You'll drive home. If you go to an event and eventually you're not going to spend a night there, you have to go home, and you constantly keep drinking. Then as you'll be driving home drunk. Okay, and if you're driving home drunk, what the chances are for you to have an accident and cause harm to yourself as well as to other people. So the food system is working perfectly for those who design it, for those who have power, for those who have the means, and for those who control so much of the world.
So what's our choice? What can we do to free ourselves from this oppressive food system we are all, or most of us, is embedded in?
That's very easy. just free ourselves. You just said it. You say we are eating the food that we're eating. The system will not function if we were not complacent to the crime. This is one crime that cannot happen unless people are complacent to it. But the thing, in my view, that gets in the way of a much more just food system is literacy. The one thing that people in power count on every single day is that stay distracted and we stay illiterate. People are illiterate, like we are totally illiterate. As in generally, we are generally very illiterate about food. I know very few people, like the people who, the number of people who understand how the food system. I'm not saying I even understand it. That's why I'm learning, and and which is actually another part of the problem. That I ask myself, if it takes a person to have the level of education that I have, to even have a general idea, to even understand generally how things work, is ridiculous, because how many people are going to attain that level of education quick enough in order to bring about change? So these people, they already have a home run, because they know, one, a lot of people are very distracted. Two, it's very high and likely that people will be able to know or get that level of detailed understanding about how the food system works quick enough, right? And when they do, by the time they do, the people who are in power will invent other things of distracting the people. So that's not something. But so that's the one. But the point is, if people could be literate and know exactly what it is they are doing, then there will be a tipping balance. Not everybody will change. There are people who really don't care because they are victims. They are victims of, or that's a casualty of the food system that we have. The casualties are some people will be so demoralized, they'll be so depressed, they'll be so hopeless about life, they'll be such pessimists, they'll be like, who care, man? I'm just gonna eat. If I get fat, if I get sick, I don't care, man. I don't care. Right now, I'm not thinking about tomorrow, which is one of the results of people who are oppressed. People who are oppressed have this survival mentality. Can I get by today? Can I just get something to eat today? I don't care about tomorrow. You see, but people who are more grounded, people who are more liberated, people who are more literate can make plans, long-term plans, and say, hey, and they can understand the long-term consequences of their actions, right? So, but having said that, if people can be literate, then it will take not even a month to crash this system. It'll only take a month. Is too long. If people say, look, we want to eat healthy food, okay? So are you gonna hire me? Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad you're hiring me. Is this job gonna allow me to eat healthy food? How much are you paying? $15 an hour. Man, I can buy organic food for $15 an hour. I'm looking for a job that can be $40 an hour, man. And I will not work. I'd rather starve and die because eating bad food is killing me anyway. So what benefit do I have? I'll be stupid to make you rich even as I die. So I'm not going to make you rich when I know making you rich will just lead me to my death. I'm not working this job. The whole country will come to a standstill. But there are always, as long as there's always somebody who is willing to work for less, then everybody who is always willing to eat bad food today, I eat it today. Okay, I eat junk today because I got busy at work. Okay, then don't say the food system is broken. You're breaking it. You should say that I'm breaking the food system. I'm promoting illegitimacy. I'm promoting my own disempowerment. I'm imprisoning myself. I'm actually taking myself to jail, paying myself to be put in jail, and then buying the lock, and then making sure that demanding that I be served bad food on my account. And I'll pay for all that because we are the one out. And not only you saying that you're willing to mortgage your children for you to be put in jail. That's the most ignorant stuff that I've ever heard. If you talk to most people, we live a lie. That's why we are all liars. If you live in an unjust food system, you cannot be an honest person if you're living in a broken food system, such as one we're living. You can be religious, you can be educated, you can be smart. Food, all animals, except human beings, eat food that's beneficial to them, to their best of their knowledge. You see, I used to always finish telling story, I guess, because I'm telling story, to wrap up. I say, when I was a young boy in the village, I asked my mother, why is it I know dogs don't eat grass? Why is that dog? Why is our dog? We had a dog called Tusker. Say, why is Tusker eating grass today? And my mother told me, you wait tomorrow. When you wake up tomorrow, if you look around the yard, you'll see the dog would have thrown up. The only time the dog eat grass is to medicate itself. If somebody call me a stupid dog, or if somebody call me a dog, I say, really? That's not now the kind of image I have of a dog in myself, in my head, when I was growing up, is of a very, very smart and very, very intelligent animal that knows how to medicate itself. That if it eats something bad, then you'll go and eat grass. And true enough, when I woke up the next day, there was a pile of puke in the yard. Where the dog had thrown up, and you can tell the grass, there was chewed grass in it, because he knows when he eat grass, he can't digest grass, so he'll throw up. But human beings, we find ways of forcing our body to accept that. We antidepressant, because we eat food, it makes us depressed, it makes us fat, it makes us foul mood, then it gives a headache, so we take a pill for just to deal with the headache, not to deal with the bad food. We take pills to lose weight, not to deal with the root cause of the problem, right? So we cannot be just people if we are living in a system whereby unjust food or illegitimate food is being served.
It also made me think of how you call your practice. It says Afro Futuristic Conscious Cuisine. And I like that it has futuristic in there, because it also kind of makes us think forward. Because the practices you are referring to, organic farming, for many it is seen as something, let's come back to the roots, let's, refuse all the developments of technology, and, let's come back to the basic. But I think if you put there futuristic, it's something looking forward, actually something which is a development, rather than like saying, no, we don't go forward, we just go backward.
Yes. Yes. I named my cuisine Afro Futuristic Conscious Cuisine. And the misnomer is a particular, like, eating this or this recipe. It's not a recipe. It's actually a philosophy. Now, when I get an opportunity to talk to people, like I'm talking to your wonderful listeners, they are actually eating my food, because food is first mental. Food is first mental, and we eat the way we think, and you can tell how we think by looking how we eat, right? So if we don't understand, we illiterate about food, then we go line up at a fast food restaurant and we eat food that's not that's not healthy for us, right? And we can justify that and all that stuff. So my cuisine, I named it Afrofuturistic because it's rooted in my own culture. So I'm recognizing the role that my culture has played in giving me this awareness and understanding about the importance of food, right? So that's the first one. So it's African based, and I'm recognizing that also by doing that, recognizing the struggle that many Africans have gone through in their history, in the history of the world, going back to maybe 500 years ago. And in just in the issue of the colonization, enslavement period, and both in Africa as well as in the quote unquote new world in the West and other places, Asia and stuff, right? So that's very important that I use the word Afro to recognize that and to tie my food to the struggle. That this struggle is not just mine; it's been going on for a long time, and that's the root of it. Right? So okay, then also I call it future. Also, I use the word Afro because it's also very, very close to the term that one of my favorite musical artists and activist, Fela Kuti, played. I mean, I grew up and I'm very, very deeply influenced by the work. Influenced by the work of Fela Kuti, and he called his music Afrobeat. So those two things just happen to match, and they're good. So futuristic, Fela Kuti, the people of African descent, African people who have gone through colonialism and slavery, have struggled with the hope of a better day. Right? So a hope of a better day, a brighter future, knowing that if they do work and they struggle and they sacrifice and they resist, then tomorrow is going to be a better day. So Afrofuturistic. Number two, I was interested in the fact, the idea that a lot of people talk about food, especially people of African descent and African in the diaspora. They talk about going back to their food of their ancestors, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. But I view that as a form of further colonizing African food, that we are putting African food in the box. My grandmother consumed the food she consumed because that's the best thing that was available at that time. If my mother had chanterelle mushrooms, and she knew the benefit of mushrooms, for example, lion's mane, French trumpet mushroom, all this, she would have consumed those things as well. My mother would think of me as being very, very stupid if I have more healthier option and then I turn that down just based on the simple fact that my grandmother ate that. And my grandmother would tell me, I sacrifice so that you can do better. If your father was so poor and and she wasn't able, or the family was, or he wasn't able to wear shoes, for example, so they sacrificed, they couldn't buy a house, so they had to rent a house. But yet now you're more educated, you'll be ignorant to go and just rent a house when you have the means to buy one, or not to buy a car and you had the means to buy an electric car, or you just have to buy a coal vehicle. Then when you have the chance to buy a solar vehicle, that's even better for the environment. So future is very, very important. So that's the basis of my cuisine. So I'm always trying to fine tune that philosophy about what is it that we need to eat. How do we need to grow that food? How do we need to process that food? And how do we need to cook that food? But most importantly, how do we need to share that food? How do we need to make sure? How can we make sure that there is full transparency in this process of food? So it's mainly a philosophy about food.
You are working with very various communities, like in gardens or organic farms. You do cooking events and whatnot. But I wonder how we can get engaged with it.
Somebody who want to support my work, one of the biggest things that I'm doing now in Kenya is building a food literacy and sustainability center. And this, and the place where I'm building it, this center, we have several branches, but the main headquarters will be a piece of property that was given to me by my father. So I'm also doing that work as a way of honoring the work that was done by him and many other people who struggle so much, so that I can have the liberty and even the opportunity to do the work that I'm doing and to improve food culture in the world. And I don't only improve food culture for Africans. Matter of fact, majority of the people who visit my website are from America and Europe. In Kenya, I talk to people on the radio, and I meet more people that way, and obviously people on the ground. So anyway, so supporting the center is one. And how can somebody support? There are three ways in which somebody can support the center. One, you can visit the place. You can come to Kenya for a visit if you want, right? But the center will have a demonstration garden. So we're having all kinds of food experiments, growing different seeds, indigenous seeds, exotic seeds that I get from other places that can improve our cuisine. So, but also we'll be creating content. We have a place where people can come, spend time. If you're an artist, if you're a writer, if you're a chef, especially I have a number of chefs who are lined up to come and visit the center so that we can create content in that space. And a lot of the hatred that marked my father's struggle and to fight the racism and the colonialism, right? Now we can start out of those foundations, out of those ashes. As we burn that system, we can create something more beautiful, mutual content. So that's about food. So that kind of thing. So the other one is donations. You can somebody who want to make a donation to the work, can donate through my website. We also work with a nonprofit called Foodies Without Borders. So either my website or through Foodies Without Borders, they can do that. And people, we get invitations too for conferences. That's a way of getting our message out. Also, that's another way people can support the work we're doing. Also, follow up on our social media. On Instagram, Chef Kabui. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, and let us know if there's any way you have any ideas of how we can do better. By the way, we are not experts. I'm not an expert. I'm just that's why I research. I'm a researcher. I'm a public intellectual trying to find different ways of doing things better. And maybe it might be important for me to mention that as I've grown, when I first started learning, I was very bitter. I thought that black people and white people should be separate. People should do their own thing. I felt very embittered because of some of the things that white people or Europeans had done to my people and to people of African descent. But as I grew up, I matured to realize that and it was not refreshing, and that's probably I don't have the proper word. But I realized that we are all suffering. That those people who had put my family, my father in detention for years, and the British or the Americans, they had just as many problems as we did. So when I realized that, I guess I matured to realizing that I'm looking now for ways where we can do a better job, so that we can all heal. We are all damaged people. You cannot dehumanize other people and still maintain your humanity, because Europeans don't have a solution to the problems. That's part of the reasons why they got to where we are. And Black people don't definitely have a solution to the problems, because they have a lot of issues that some of the issues that Europeans have, but some of the problems that Europeans don't have. So we are all incomplete. And the only way we can move forward is not to separate, but to figure out how we can work better. But as Joshua Abraham Heschel said, few are guilty, but we are all responsible of fixing this. That's it.
These words definitely stayed with me from our conversation with Kabui. We eat the way we think. You can tell how we think by looking at how we eat. I feel like adding one more question. What story does the food you will eat today tell about yourself? Oh, and don't forget to follow up on Chef Kabui's work on his webpage, www.chefkabui.com, as well as on social media. If you would like to know more about the show, listen to this episode again, or find previous episodes, please go to helsinkiopenwaves.com or fermentradio.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you at hello@fermentradio.com. Ferment Radio is broadcast by Helsinki Open Waves, supported by Culture of Cultures and produced by Super Eclectic. Thank you for listening, keep fermenting, and stay tuned for the next episode of Ferment Radio.